Yeah, I think there was something so profound when I was reading that Man's Search for Meaning book in that class, where, Viktor Frankl was talking about his experiences in the concentration camp, and he said there were some of us, like it was a very rare type of person, but there were some people who, like under the enormity of suffering in that situation, they became truly compassionate in a way he had never seen his entire life. There were some people who woke up every day, with a smile on their face, through all of the suffering and the pain, with everything being taken away, like with all of the just enormity of suffering of that situation, and they tried to make the world a better place around them. Like if they were, seeing someone walking along with like hurt feet and like, terrible condition of shoes, they might walk up and offer them their shoes and be like, yeah, like we can switch shoes for the day because my feet aren't as messed up as yours are. And it's like maybe this person didn't necessarily benefit at all from being a kinder and more compassionate person, but everyone around them benefited, and the overall like atmosphere for the camp and the prisoners improved, and it's like in a way, if you want to see the situation around you improve, you can be the one to improve that. Like you put that energy out there, maybe you start to see the ripples of that around in your entire life, and then maybe the effort you put in that seems like you're doing it selflessly and it won't come around to you at all, it does. Like if you want to say that there is karma in this world, I think that's sort of what it is like our consequences do have actions, and the emotions we instill in others are very powerful. If you treat someone bad, it's going to come around to you in some way in the world you're helping to create.
Yeah, and can I add on to that? So I feel like if you are actively encouraging others, you are practicing encouragement, and you are now a better encourager. And who are you going to affect the most? The person you're around the most, which is you. So
Wow.
if you're practicing love, practicing loving others, then you're going to be that much better at loving yourself. If you're practicing encouragement, if you're practicing judgment, if you're like, oh, look at that guy, like I never couldn't be me, you are now like better at judging, and you are have to live with that version. You're gonna have to live with that judgment too, more than anybody else. So when you see somebody that's like, you know, thinks they're better than everybody else, like constantly judging, looking down on everybody else, we think like, where's the justice? Like he just gets to go around and just bully everybody. It's like that guy has to deal with himself.
Yeah, dude.
So that's the karma right there.
Yeah, it's like I don't remember exactly. There's this phrase about like thieves, and it's like, someone who gets into stealing has no loyalty to themselves in a way, you know what I mean? Like if you're willing to do that to your fellow man, to like take something from them, then it seems like you're the kind of person who has no scruples with mistreating yourself and taking from yourself in a way.
Yeah, being a good judge of character is the skill with the utmost value, because, people are consistent, to say the least. Like, if your friend is willing to steal from a stranger, then there is a circumstance where your friend will steal from you. Like, if they are capable of judging someone else for certain actions, you think that you are like not going to be exposed to the same treatment under different circumstances.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like people are consistently the same character unless given to conscious deliberation, like to changing themselves. But that's something that only comes with like real wisdom. Like, I think it's usually later in life when people start to consciously work on their character, because it's something that kind of flies under the radar. Like it happens in a very unconscious level, like your moral code and the way that you judge yourself and the way that you love yourself. But it's kind of like a cheat code. Like, it's like if you were in a video game, you could change your own stats. Everybody else is going around and their stats are changing just based off of the circumstances they're in, the dungeons that they're doing. But your character can just go like meditate in the cave and just evolve its own stats because the circumstances don't actually have to happen physically, they can happen mentally, like with our
Yeah.
imaginations.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're not catalyzing yourself, the world will catalyze you. And so you ought to be going in and like recognizing these faults you have and these problems that you need to work on and trying to work on them within yourself instead of waiting for the world to like beat it into you that this is an issue, you know? And some people just like willingly ignore it because it's so hard to want to like face those aspects yourself. I know some people who, just because they're like adults and they're like, well, you know, I've reached that age, like I'm done changing as a person, they just
Hmm.
accept what they are. And
Definitely.
everyone around them, all these other adults, also accept who they are. And they're like, all right, well, you know, I guess that's just who he is. We all just have to accept that, you know?
Yeah, they say that your brain like stops developing after a certain age. Is that because we as human beings stop developing? Or do we as human beings stop developing because our brain stops developing? Like, I kind of think that it's just based off of like, it's like they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You definitely can. It's just a matter of like fluidity. When you get just way too comfortable with who you are and you just give up on change, then sure, you're making a conscious decision to avoid fluidity.
Yeah, I'd like to stay fluid my whole life, you know what I mean? I think that, you know, I've been subjected to a lot of adults in my life, a lot of tyrants that did not change, and so they happen to just be the same person they'd always been. And I felt like I had to change to become better at being tyrannized because they could never stop being a tyrant, you know? And I don't want to be that tyrant in other people's lives. Like, if I was a father and I messed up and I treated my child badly, I'd want to be the kind of father who could sit my kid down and say, I'm sorry, like, I was out of line completely and I'm not perfect and I'm trying to work on myself and continue to be a better person for you. It's like, do those sorts of parents even exist, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're trying to save their perception of us by like not admitting fault, but your kid might respect you even more if he sees that you can admit that you're not perfect. Like I remember having that same feeling, like neither of our parents could ever admit fault, and I just saw them as like super stubborn and arrogant, and I thought like, okay, I will never be able to get through to them. They're never gonna listen to me. They're never gonna change because they. And I feel like what it is shame and guilt. Like I'm going back to those two things. The reason why people don't change is because they give up on themselves. You really have to continue to be your own parent. And that's how you change, is when you're consciously learning lessons and allowing for growth. But I think some adults are rapidly changing like for their entire life until they die. But then you meet people that are just the exact same. Like from the day you meet them to 20 years later, they're the exact same person. I feel like it's because they gave up on their own development. They stopped like guiding themselves down the path. They were just like, okay, like yeah, I'm just like, um, yeah, just like irredeemable. Like I'm never gonna like make it up to myself. I'm just like, yeah, pity old, like poor old me. I'm just gonna pity myself.
For real. And it's like you can be that example for others in a way. Like if you come around and you're always working on yourself and changing who you are, then people get used to this idea that you are a fluid person and that they can't have any firm perceptions of who you are. And then if they feel like, you know, you are comfortable being different every time, then they don't feel held to being the same way either. I think like the right friend group could help each other all evolve as people, you know.
Yeah,
It's a powerful thing.
yeah, it's totally true. Like going back to what we were talking about earlier, like as a child, like you get used to your kid always changing, and then as an adult, it's like you get used to your friends never changing. But yeah, like if you become consistently fluid, then like everybody's gonna know the only thing consistent about him is his that he's always changing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like that's how it should be. Like the universe is always changing. The only thing constant is change.
True. In fact, it's not as if you're putting an effort to change, it's you're putting an effort to resist change. And that's the thing. Like, there is some amount of like
True.
chaos and inertia, you know, that's acting upon you. Like, I think of these people who have stayed the same for years and years, it's because they're constantly resisting all of these lessons that come up. Like certain people, I've seen time and time how they're upset with themselves by the way they've acted. They just cannot get past this aspect of themselves because they're just like resisting it and too like, having too much self-pity or self-importance or some mix of the two.
Yeah, that's so true. It does takes energy to resist change, and it takes energy to change. And I take it back. It's not just shame and guilt, it's also comfort. You become so comfortable with what you are, who you are. That's the now the known. You understand yourself so well. You identify with certain characteristics of personality, and you don't want to see yourself become different. But I have a strong philosophy that new is always better. Like the evolved version of you is always going to be better, because like every single day, if you're changing, you're going to be building off of the past. You're going to become wiser and smarter, more well-rounded. I think that every single human being should set a goal to become as balanced as possible. Like if personality is a spectrum, then as we all evolve, we are all moving towards the very middle of the spectrum, like adopting all of the characteristics at the same time and balancing.